Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CricBlog Podcast. We have a special interview today with Adam Bell from the Cricketeers Podcast. Very knowledgeable fan on Pakistan cricket and New Zealand cricket, and those are the topics we'll be discussing today. Adam, welcome to the CricBlog Podcast, mate. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me. The pleasure, and always enjoy reading tweets about cricket. Always knowledgeable, so it's nice to finally meet you and have a chat with you.
Same to you, mate. So on cricket, the first question we always ask our guests is, how did you sort of come to know about the game, and how did you fall in love with the sport? What's your journey been like with cricket?
My dad was the one that got me into cricket. He himself actually didn't play, but he moved to Australia in his 20s,
Yep.
and it was the underarm match that got him into cricket.
Right.
So when he obviously came back to New Zealand, he was still interested in it, and then he got me a cricket set, and I played as a kid. And then the first series that I remember vividly was a series in 1991-92 season when New Zealand played Australia, and Chris Pringle defended or bowled a maiden to Bruce Reid, and we won a famous game. So that's
Yep.
kind of how old I am, and
Nice.
that's how long the cricket journey's been. And I think cricket's one of those sports that once it gets in your blood, it's addictive.
Mm.
I used to always be like cricket's my summer sport, and then rugby league was always my winter sport that I followed. And now it's kind of like cricket's kind of getting to that point where it's nearly a full year for me.
So what I was telling my
Um,
wife yesterday, I said, because I was watching the IPL and I'm like, this is all year round. She's like, and she's just shaking her head and goes, poor me, you know. It is
it
all
is
year round, isn't it? Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, so similar story with me. So my dad, yeah, introduced me to cricket. So did my uncles, and they were actually in love with the West Indies side of the 80s. Your Vivian Richards and co. And Dad still
Yep.
talks about him today. So any good player I talk about today, Dad's like, oh, it's not as good as Vivian Richards, or can't do this. So, but yeah, look, and I'm grateful that we got introduced to cricket at a young age because it's a fantastic sport. Um, in terms of Pakistan cricket, you got great knowledge of Pakistan cricket, the domestic cricket, the up and coming players, so those insights from you are fantastic. But as you know, like they've struggled a lot in the last few years, in particular since that 2021 T20 World Cup. They beat India by 10 wickets. They made the semi final. They made the T20 World Cup final the next year as well, but they were pretty lucky to get to that final, I think. So, what would you say that the two or three biggest issues, Pakistan cricket are facing at the moment? Because they just seem quite off it on the field right now.
I mean, there's a lot of issues. So
Yeah,
just nailing it down to two or three is challenging in
true,
itself.
true. You could be here
Which
all
which
day. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably the problem with their cricket at the moment. I mean, I think first they touch on selection issues for a start,
Mm,
especially like inside of the Champions Trophy. To go into that tournament home with only one specialist spinner and one specialist opener, for me, was disastrous. Um, so that's one problem that they've got, and then that kind of
yeah.
feeds into the coaching issue as well. Yeah, look, it's hard enough trying to get a competitive team in international cricket without having a coach every 5 minutes. You
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
obviously the players are under a lot of pressure there, and it's a big, obviously it's a huge market, and they're passionate about the cricket. But to have that pressure on you as well, and also have different messages constantly, it's got to do something. Got to do some things to the players, doesn't it?
Yeah,
So I think that's
absolutely.
one of the big issues that they've got is that
Mm,
merry-go coaching run. And then I think obviously the domestic structure as well that develops their players. I mean, if we look at like the under 19 World Cup, was it what, last year? Was the year before? Um, they got to the semi-finals.
mm,
So
mm,
they've got talent in their system, but
mm.
it's that pathway from from under 19s to international that seems to be missing. Obviously you're aware with Australia A have a program that they always participate in with England Lions, and
Yep.
India A, New Zealand A done the same. I mean, they do have a Shaheen's program that they played Sri Lanka at home last year, but they really need to bridge that gap between the domestic and international cricket. And they
Mm.
really do need their Shaheen's team to be playing like in senior countries for a start, give them more experience in foreign conditions,
Yeah.
because I think that's one thing that's really letting them down at the moment is being able to adapt to foreign conditions, and that's just three. I mean, I could get into
Yeah.
obviously political interference. I could get into um, all those type of things, but they've got a lot of issues. Obviously, the fact that they are hamstrung by being able to participate in T20 tournaments is probably an issue. They're away from home for 10 years, which I think probably has meant that their facilities haven't been upgraded in that time as well. And a whole generation of kids didn't see their heroes at home. You add in all these things together, and you can kind of see why the decline of Pakistan cricket has kind of gone. It's kind of gone unnoticed, and then it kind of just hit home in the last year. Like I think we probably always see Pakistan as a team that kind of, um, 1 minute they're up, 1 minute they're down, and you kind of expect a comeback, but then it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
And now I think the actual true reflection of their cricket has kind of come to the fore in the last year.
Yeah.
But I think there's some signs for optimism the next while, but I think it's going to be a long-term project to get their cricket back to being at least in that top, say, half of the test playing nations.
Yeah, makes sense. What I think they need is stability because you're right that they're changing coaches all the time, and it's like the coach doesn't have a say. They bring in Gillespie and they bring in Kirsten and they're bringing in their ideas, but they're sort of like undermined, if you know what I mean, by the board, and
Yeah, exactly.
they're out the door very quickly, right? And you make a good point about the youngsters not having that pathway, but I also think about the situation. This might come in hand with the coaching. It's you got players that burst onto the scene. They make such an impact early on in international cricket, but they fade away. I don't know if you noticed that with
Yeah,
Pakistani players as well. So I
yeah,
think
yeah,
Shaheen, I
exactly.
think Shaheen Shah Afridi is one of those players at the moment who's experiencing that. They start with a bang and then it's almost like they regress. Maybe Shadab Khan is another example.
Yeah.
So would you put that down to the coaching as well, or just the lack of stability?
I think it's probably both, to
Mm.
be honest, and it's possibly also the fact that these guys are being made superstars in their own
Yeah,
country, in a
yeah,
country of its 250 million that love their cricket, and you put on that pedestal so early, that the drop off is can be inevitable if you're
mm.
not going to improve your game. I think the fact that a lot of those guys became three format players very early on, which meant that they didn't get time to develop in first class cricket either. And this is not just a Pakistan issue as well. This is going to be an issue for a lot of teams. If you are a
Yeah,
young player and you get into international cricket at one format early, that means that you may miss a lot of other formats to develop in. And I think that's kind of happened with Pakistan. I think Shadab Khan played domestic cricket with the Babar Azam trophy last season for the first time in I think 4 or 5 years.
yeah,
Partly because their domestic season kind of clashes with ICC tournaments. In our ICC tournaments now every 5 minutes these days, and
yeah,
also lately they've been in October, November. Um, So I think that's another thing as well. So they don't have really had the time to develop in first class cricket either. So I think that's a Pakistan issue, but I think it's going to be an issue for
yeah,
other nations
absolutely. Yes,
going forward, actually.
absolutely. So, in terms of one of the big Pakistan players, I mean, Babar Azam is in the spotlight regarding his form. He's been out of form for some time. What do you make of him as a player, and what do you think he needs to do to sort of recapture his best form and own the big games? Because he was the one that, his fans and supporters were trying to bring into a Fab Five along with Smith, Root, Kohli, and Williamson.
Personally, don't think he was ever at that level.
Yeah,
I think he's a hugely talented guy. I think that he took on the burden of being the next great talent
yeah,
after Yunus Khan retired. And when the expectations in that country obviously are higher than many others, and to take that burden on and to be that main guy, I think was tough for him. And again, like you look at his first class numbers, I mean, I think he's only got like 13 first class centuries or something along those lines.
yeah,
That's not numbers that you link to someone who is a great first class player,
yeah,
when you look at some of the other numbers of guys around. So again, like he was put into a position so young to take on the mantle. Um, he's had to deal with captaincy, strip captaincy, um, coaches coming in and out, all those things.
yeah,
Um, and I think it's obviously had an effect on his cricket. I think his kind of laid back style also draws a lot of attention to him because he probably, unlike say Coley, who he's compared to a lot by a
Mm.
lot of people, who's very brash, he's very animated. His character is a little quieter, a little more laid back, so he does have that air of being flaky. And the fact that he hasn't really produced in the big moments for Pakistan, but he's only 30 years old, and in Pakistan have a history of a lot of cricketers that played to their late 30s. So he has a long career ahead of him. Where he goes from there, he will be interesting. Like for me, he could either be the guy that averages, early 40s, has 15 Test centuries, which is still like a good Test career. Or he goes to the extra level and becomes a great of Pakistan cricket,
Mm.
or a great of world cricket. It's really, I think this time in his career, I think is really, really important. Where
Absolutely.
he ends up, I think this area will be um, significant, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, around the 30 years of age, typically considered a batter's peak. So massive, massive period in Babar Azam's career. Onto the PSL, which has started over the weekend. Who are some of the young up and coming talents that we should keep an eye on?
Ali Raza, a young fast bowler who plays for Zelmi, he looks very, very promising.
Yeah.
He was part of the Pakistan under-19 side that's made the
Yep.
semi-finals and lost to Australia.
Hmm.
He actually got Sam Constas out,
All right.
funnily enough. So that's
Nice.
a pretty big
Yep.
scalp, I guess, when you look back on
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So he's really promising. Bowls early 140s, and bowled a really good spell the other day against Quetta on a pitch that was really flat, where
Mm.
everybody's getting belted. The other one is Arafat Minyas, who again was part of that under-19 side. He captained the team. He's really very promising left arm orthodox all rounder. He was very, very economical in the last under 19 World Cup. Can hit the ball. Is only 19. Got a massive future.
Mm.
Um, a lot of fans want him pushed into the system pretty quickly. And I think with Pakistan's it's kind of spinning all rounder woes, I think you could see him
Yeah.
elevated pretty soon. Another young guy is Kawaj Nafai, who kind of burst onto the scene in the PSL last season. Ian Pont, I saw a tweet where he rates him really highly. He had a really good BPL recently. He's a really explosive batter. He's in a team that has a lot of top order batters, and he is a top order batter. So whether he
Mm.
can fit into
Yeah.
that Zelm team, I'm sorry, that Quetta team's going to be interesting. So those are the three guys that I think you should
Yeah.
watch out for.
Nice. 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 And who do you think will go on and win the tournament? Do you have anyone in mind in terms of who will go on and lift the trophy?
I predicted Zelmi, but they got absolutely pumped in the first game. And
Yeah.
I kind of went on the Barber having his usual being the best in the competition. Then you've got Ayub, who's probably probably argue the other two best batters in Pakistan right now, and then Mukim, who's a very, very very good left arm. So I predicted. So I'll stick my neck out and say that I think they will do it come business end.
Yeah. Hopefully they can get maybe Mitch Owen, our boy Mitch Owen here from Australia, up the order. Yeah, batting him too low.
Yeah,
Down,
I know.
down at seven. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like,
Yeah.
what strikes me that makes me laugh though is how little knowledge people have of overseas players. Like, I watched BBL, Mitch Owen like was smashing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously they beat the final, the 100 in the final. I'd probably argue he's outside of the regular Australian T20 players. He's
Yeah.
probably the,
Absolutely.
the next cab off the rank, even ahead of JFM now, who's obviously struggling. So how he has not been promoted up the order and is left as a finisher is down to me, to be honest.
Yep. Yep. With all the footage that's available and all the access you've got to T20 leagues around the world, yeah, it's a blunder that he's batting so low. So they get him up the order and he fires, then definitely that can be a factor. Um, On to now New Zealand cricket. The performances against Pakistan recently, they were very promising. You guys had a lot of players out, of course, with IPL duty, etc. But where do you see New Zealand cricket at the moment, and who are some of the up and coming players who can make a mark in the coming years?
I think New Zealand is in a very good position. I think we're kind of like the antithesis of Pakistan. We're stable,
Mhm.
and I think
Yes.
I
Yeah,
think
you
that's
follow
probably
you
a good
follow two
position to
teams
be
that
in.
on the opposite ends, don't you? You follow two.
Ex- ex- Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I always say that Pakistan need a bit of New Zealand.
Yeah.
That's what they need, a bit of stability. Um,
Mm.
so I think New Zealand's in a really good position. I think the test results last year were interesting. I mean, to lose to Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka was disappointing, but we know it could be challenging over there. And then to turn that around and to beat India in India is absolutely remarkable.
Yep.
And then come back home.
Craziest series result in
Exactly.
Test history. Yeah. That's what I reckon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Biggest upset. I can't think of anything more. And then when you add in, they come back home and then they get beaten soundly by England in the first two tests. They
Yeah.
thumped England in the last two tests. How do you assess those results? It's hard to figure out where the New Zealand Test team is based on those results. And then earlier in the year they got beaten by Australia 2-0. They had chances in the second test to win. I think Rachin Ravinda dropped Mitch Marsh early on, and we
Yep.
all know what happened there. Gary playing an all timer.
Yeah. You had us on
So
toast in that second test. Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
even I'm
Yeah.
not going to say that we should have beaten you in the first test because I think Cameron Green just played just
Yeah.
amazing innings, right?
Yep.
Sometimes people do that, right? But I think the second test, New Zealand had chances to win that game.
Mm.
So I think generally, I think New Zealand right now are outside. If you're looking on the pecking order, I think there's India and Australia, and I think New Zealand is probably third,
Yeah.
third or fourth. I think we're up there.
Yep.
If you are assessing all formats at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I agree because again, you also got to consider with New Zealand, you've had a few great fast bowlers come out of the side, so it's just a bit of a transition period in that aspect as well. But a very interesting year coming ahead for New Zealand. But you have been losing some cricketers to T20 franchises, T20 franchise cricket, players opting not to sign central contracts. Does that concern you a lot? And what more do you think the ICC could do to help avoid this around the world? Because it's not only New Zealand who have that problem. I don't think it's other nations around the world. So do you think more can be done to protect international cricket?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
I guess in New Zealand's situation, we've lost Conway and Kane Williamson were the two major ones that turned contracts down. I mean, those guys, if we're to be honest, are probably in a position where they can pick and choose a little bit of what to do. And when New Zealand really doesn't play a whole lot of Test cricket anyway, you
Mm.
know. Um,
Yeah.
but then we've also got a problem where we've got white ball players now that are deciding, hang on a minute, there's a lot of grass out there to get.
Yeah.
Finn Allen's one. I think all New Zealand cricket can really do, or the ICC can really do, is ensure New Zealand plays more tests for a start, and then assures that there's a universal payment to at least make the guys that want to play test cricket commit to test cricket for maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Encourage
think
them.
that's
Yep.
really all they can do, right? I think the Finn Allens of this world, I don't think you can really do anything. They are going to be kind of, how do we put this, white ball freelancers,
They're a freelancer.
play your game
Exactly.
for New Zealand. And I also think if we really, and this is another part of the issue as well, is that a lot of bilateral one day cricket or LT20 cricket really doesn't matter a lot anymore, for a lot of players. So that's another part of this issue as well. So I mean, if you're Finn Allen, would you rather play for the Perth Scorchers and make, was it maybe 400,000 AU a year, or would you
Mm.
rather play a bilateral series on a match to match basis?
Yeah. No,
What do
absolutely.
you do?
Yeah.
And
That's
he'd be
yeah.
way down the pecking order on a real lower salary as well. So, I think there's that element. But I think in terms of the core sport, which we all love, which is Test cricket, I think a universal payment, and I think also more tests are needed. Um,
Agree.
Other than that, I think it's really difficult to stop the white ball players doing what they
No,
want
agree.
to do.
Agree. I think what we also need is some context around white ball internationals because they had that Super League for the ODIs and they scrapped it after one cycle, which I thought was disappointing. I thought it was a good concept where you have that qualification aspect and you put a little bit more context to bilateral ODI cricket. because you're right. If you've just got a bilateral 3-match ODI series, it's not very appealing to players. They'll go off and it's not even appealing for most fans as well. You've got to put a bit of context behind it in terms of bigger selling points.
Well, the B series now, aren't they? I mean, most teams don't even rock out their best 11s,
No,
and it's been like that
exactly.
for a long, long time. Once the golden generation of the Rohits and the Kohlis and the Australian Cummins, etc. Once they retire, who we're not really going to know who teams 18s are anymore. Like we're basing 18s based on like the last 5 or 10 years of watching white
Exactly.
ball cricket.
Yeah, yeah,
Going forward, we're
yeah.
going to be like, well, who is an 18? Who's the B team?
Whoever's
Um,
whoever's
it's going
fit,
to
whoever's fit and hasn't played a lot of cricket recently, that's probably
Ex- exactly, exactly.
it.
But then we all look at the international windows part of it as well, right? That works to a degree, but look at the BBL and Australian Test cricket. It's placed where it is because that's kind of the Australasian holidays where you can get all the fans. You can't really split those two up either.
You
So,
can't. So
um,
yeah, you're exactly
yeah,
right. So I see those arguments. Oh, you need the test players available for the BBL, so you got to do test cricket earlier, but then you miss out on the Boxing Day and then the New Year's, and that's the peak time for test cricket in Australia, and that also is the time that works for the BBL as well, because that's the school holidays and that's when people engage with it. So yeah, it's a pickle. It's a tough one. So on to the last question here, mate. In terms of the women's team, obviously an amazing triumph last year in the T20 World Cup. Could they pull off something similar, the ODI World Cup later this year in India? How do you think they'll fare? I know it's a few months out still, but what are your hopes for that tournament?
I think they're going to struggle. They got soundly beaten by Australia at home in familiar conditions, and I think there were a lot of things that went in New Zealand's favour
Yep.
in in um in Dubai. The fact that Australia were knocked out, I think, was a big one, and then South Africa really had played their final going into the
Yeah.
final
Yeah.
of that tournament. So I think New Zealand had a really good tournament and was great for women's cricket. But I think ultimately, when you get to the longer format, that's where the differences in class really come out. So I think if New Zealand were to somehow get a semi-final spot, I think that would probably be an overachievement, to be honest. But yeah, I don't think there are expectations to win this time around.
We said that before the T20 World Cup. I think you guys came in with some terrible form in that tournament. But yeah, you're right. I guess the longer format makes things a bit more tricky, but you never know. We'll see how things go in that tournament. So, Adam, thanks so much for your time. It was a great chat. Great to finally meet you and wonderful insights on Pakistan and New Zealand cricket. And to the viewers, you can catch this on YouTube, CricBlog TV, and also the CricBlog Podcast on the audio platform, Spotify and Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Adam for your time, mate. Have a great day and week ahead, mate. Thanks.
Thanks for having me, mate.